right, look at that
Richard
setup.
Grove.
Hey, Richard, how's it going?
Hey,
Welcome.
is it mirrored everything backwards on your end, or is it all right?
No,
Epstein.
it looks
The
normal.
whole world is backwards right now.
All right, cool. Because there's like
Yeah.
settings in StreamYard, and I haven't used them in a while. How you guys doing?
Good.
Very
How's it
good.
going?
Good to see
Welcome.
I like the atmosphere here. Freed Ross. That's
Hell yeah.
that's a new addition to the sign. Yeah,
you. Did a quick modification.
Nice.
I like it.
Where'd you
Yeah,
get to be?
I was like, what am I gonna do with my Free Ross Day 1 shirt? But now I have some ideas.
Did you have
Yeah.
to go to the craft store to get the construction paper to make that, or how'd you do it?
Yeah.
I had a bag from a sushi restaurant that was black, and I just cut it.
Wow, very crafty there, Babs.
I'm a real do-it-yourself kind of a guy, you know.
A black sushi bag.
That's the best one yet.
Freed Ross.
That's
Nice.
the best one.
Yeah.
So welcome, Richard, from
Yeah, good evening.
Autonomy. The reason I wanted you to come on is because you've been a Free Ross supporter since, forever, and have been, like one of the definite OGs, and just wanted to bring you on to kind of, review, what we've been through. So welcome.
It's been a long road, and I credit PorkFest, right? Because that's where Lynn gave her first speech, to my knowledge. That's where I saw Luke Rudowski, one of my peers, interviewing her. And when I went back the next year, I made sure that I had all the camera equipment and did a heavy duty full on interview. But it's the other people. I didn't ever use Silk Road. I didn't know who Ross was. I'd never used Tor. I wasn't into any of that. But when I heard the plight of a mother who was in turmoil and the injustice that was going on in my country, and the fact that there was obviously a political sentencing, right? It's a victimless crime. He's not a violent offender. Kathleen Forrest was the judge, said he was penalized for his philosophy, his Ron Paul libertarian philosophy, and needed to be set an example. And
she blurted that out. She did not hide that fact at all. She didn't even feel like she needed to obscure the fact that was his philosophy that she said. And I think you still have that philosophy. So we're going to have to lock you up forever.
And it was also, the signature of the deep state personnel that were prosecuting and persecuting Ross and putting, his mom through all that. Those people were well known to me, and this wasn't the first time that they had done something noteworthy. And in that case, the targeting, caging, framing, all that stuff that went on, really, it was a show of their hypocrisy. You had Eric Holder involved in that prosecution at that time. He's doing, Operation Gunrunner, and
has he
Fast and
been
Furious.
brought to justice for that?
I don't think he got pardoned either.
Okay.
Right. There was Chuck Schumer. There was a whole bunch of, you might see them, not you guys, but if you look at things in a right left dichotomy, you would see like Schumer's on the left. He's a Democrat, right? But it's just that the deep state has its strongest tentacles in through the party that used to support slavery. They're not abolitionists. They're not freedom-minded people. They are people of entitlement to, so generally the deep state agenda is embraced by them. And so all these recent political prosecutions of like Trump and stuff like that, when you see the FBI used in a political manner, that's because of the deep state influence in it, not because, we had so many people on the left that were just in there and thought of it doing it themselves. There's been a long ongoing plan to bring this country into turmoil and weakness and demise. And going back to Silk Road, that young Eagle Scout, Penn State grad idealist who was not educated on how the world works, goes out and does something for the free market to give people, here's customer satisfaction ratings in otherwise a dodgy area of commerce out there sometimes, right? You don't know who you're dealing with, and satisfaction isn't always the optimum thing. So to set up shop in the area that he did, that was a brilliant entrepreneurial idea. And I'm also a graduate of Penn State, so we can both blame Penn State. Bill Binney is a graduate of Penn State. I think all of us wish we would have gotten a real education about how the world works, but we didn't. And we all encountered the globalists in various ways. And so far, we've all lived to tell about it. But this is an ongoing story. And just because Ross is liberated, I mean, the people who were behind that whole thing, they They've never been brought to justice. And there's a lot of things that haven't been adjudicated, but we did have a release allegedly today of the JFK, MLK, RFK resources, assets, evidence, etc. We'll see if that actually fleshes out. But
is that for real? Give me,
Yeah,
what are your
the
expectations?
White House there's a Reuters press statement from a White House press statement that says that Trump signed an executive order to release Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy, and JFK secret records about their assassinations. And I think that's good. And part of the reason, my hypothesis, which now can be proved out, let's see if it's right or wrong, was that we had other countries that we didn't want to embarrass involved in those events. Like if there's CIA involved, you bet MI6 was involved, and you could probably hedge your bet and say Mossad was involved in any type of thing where, because those agencies interoperate as part of the Anglo-American Israeli establishment. So it's hard to say, did Oswald do it? No. Did the mafia do it? Well, they played a role. Did the CIA do it? They played a role. Did MI6 have something to do with it? And if they have a 75-year secrecy act that would apply to a situation that they have in America, that would be a plausible reason. Israel's a similar type of security policy. So Trump making this stand and putting these documents out, he may be embarrassing certain allies, but maybe those allies have been subtle enemies for a long time, and people find out, and things grow in the right direction.
Here was the clip of it today where he signed it.
Lastly, sir, we have an executive order ordering the declassification of files relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
That's a big one, huh? I've been waiting for this for years, for decades.
That's a big one, huh?
You
That's
just,
a soundbite right there.
just signed
Why
it
didn't he
away.
do that one 4 years ago? Wasn't he supposed? He promised to do that 4 years
Look,
ago.
why didn't he free
and
Ross
didn't.
4 years ago? So look, he had these opportunities. He was, I think, still capitulating to the existing deep state.
Mhm.
Over the
Yep.
past 4 years, between COVID and all these other shenanigans that they've pulled, his Mar-a-Lago raid and all that sort of stuff, prosecuting anyone who's done business with him, I think Trump's at the point where he'll do anything he wants to hurt the deep state at this point. And if they've been keeping those things secret, he figures it's probably a good thing to put him out. Even if he hasn't seen them, he hasn't had time to see any of that stuff. He's just like, yep. And I also want to point out, they used to sign him with Mont Blancs. He signs everything with a Sharpie now. It's just a giant Sharpie, and then he goes to the next Sharpie. He's a Renaissance guy.
I think that was like at the Libertarian convention when I was sitting in the back when Babs almost got us kicked out, but that's another story. But at the Libertarian, it was sitting in the back, and when he was discussing that, his first line was like, after everything I've been through, I'm with the courts and the judges and the deep state, I am kind of a libertarian myself. So I think he's kind of like you said, Richard, I think he's just gone through, like, he's experienced this and is just like, fuck it, let's go.
Yeah,
I
I think it's
very generous.
Well, I mean, let's go to Bab's side of it. Let's play devil's advocate, right? Because I think scrutiny and not just rah cheering him on is a good thing. Like, I think it's good to recognize when someone takes actionable steps that are good, but I could likely criticize Pam Bondi and her positions on Second Amendment, and there's other First Amendment things going on right now. So freedom's always under attack. We must be vigilant. Freedom is a super marathon, not a sprint, and no president is going to give us our rights back. However, this guy is taking action more in a freedom direction than the last guy. And so barometer or temperature wise, we're just noticing that the needle's moving, not saying it's all liberty and unicorns, James. So go ahead.
I'm just not sure, like which way the needle's moving, right? Like, because there's so many different areas. Just he's promised to militarize, deploy the military on U.S. soil, a new taxing authority. Well,
he's got the external tax revenue service he's going on, right? And he said the other day, those 85,000 IRS agents, those armed agents, he said we should send them to the border. He's like, we don't need them in doing the IRS tax collection stuff. And
what are they going to do? What are they going to do? Audits of tomato pickers crossing?
Dude, they're going to do audits of the dotted line, but there's we're talking about a statist topic first off, so like we don't have to talk about statism.
I just feel like, that maybe the deep state, just, is like, well, let's negotiate, right? If Trump has negotiated with the Jewish lobby, it's like, hey, we'll give you the Golan Heights. We'll give you this. Oh, what do the Libertarians want? Oh, they want Ross. Okay, we'll give them Ross. Oh, what do these guys want? We'll give them that.
Give them all the small stuff they want so they can take Project Stargate and mRNA and make panopticon. And all these other sort of things.
Right. We got, and JD Vance, right? Like, wasn't he like escorted in by Peter Thiel and the Palantir crew? And
you're speaking truths. However, on the Golan Heights, I just want to point out that started during the 6-Day War and the USS Liberty being attacked, and LBJ said, don't take the Golan Heights. And then they took the Golan Heights. So that's been going on like longer than my lifetime. But yes, they did recently just take that, and they just invaded the West Bank. So while they had a ceasefire with Hamas in Gaza, they just invaded the West Bank. So there's
a whole stopping.
There is no stopping. That's Bibi. He gets adjudicated if he stops. So they're going to keep opening wars on whatever fronts they have to, including Hezbollah and or dragging America into it. Although, I would have said like 6 years ago, Israel had our, proverbial nuts in a sack like that, because Trump's whole administration was like, Bibi slept at Jared Kushner's apartment in New York, right? That's how tight it was. But now, maybe not so tight, because Bibi's made himself a, what do they say, liability?
Are they still going to do his laundry?
Are they still going to do his laundry? He is. No, this is true. When the diplomats come over, they have this option. It's in like U.S. foreign policy, how you treat them. Bibi's apparently the only one who uses it, and he brings a lot of laundry when he comes and has.
He brings all his clothes with him.
Yeah.
It's like coming back from college to your mom's house, and you're like, Mom, I brought all my clothes.
If you think about it, like pre 9/11. With Convar and these other systems of telecommunications where they've been sniffing America's dirty laundry for like 20 years, it's only fair turn of play to have to do their laundry every now and then.
That's funny.
Well,
that's a surveillance joke.
They've been doing a good job of keeping the Epstein files secure. It's not like they don't do anything for U.S. interests.
Who do you think Epstein was working for?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, Robert Maxwell worked for MI6 and Mossad. And then Ghislaine inherited the network, and she's more powerful than Jeffrey Epstein. Like, Epstein was a nobody. He's a Dalton School grad. He gets tapped by that dude's dad. You know who I'm talking about? Oh, I should look it up. Not John Bolton. There is
Secretary Blink isn't
No, Blinken's got it.
Secretary Blinken.
Blinken's got an interesting story, but it was the other guy. He was like an attorney general. I can't believe I'm know his name right now.
There was a whole like
Toby Wong.
No, let me find Wong. Toby Wong.
Speaking of Bolton, did you see Trump revoke
Reservoir Dogs?
His security clearance?
Yeah, that was so based. He revoked his security clearance,
and he did it for Pompeo too.
Nice.
Yeah, so the first time Trump got into office, the first dude he put as commerce secretary was Wilbur Rothschild, and he surrounded himself with a whole bunch of deep state scoundrels, and his whole cabinet was people who were just traditional deep state apparatus. And he found out, I think, the limitations of that position when you get into it, when it's basically Obama's third term, right? They had all the momentum. They spied on Trump from the get-go. Who was it? It was MI6 that was spying on Trump for Obama and helping him get all that stuff done. That's where the PP-Gate dossier and all that stuff came from MI6. The whole Russiagate thing starts from MI6, then was taken root in this country with the Clinton organization, who's, Bill Clinton's a Rhodes Scholar. His job's to bring Anglo-American establishment agendas into our way of life. So they spent a good long time persecuting a whole bunch of people for that stuff, which was nonsense. If you look at the records, it was Obama and Biden who spoke at University of Moscow and had cozy relationships with biolabs in Ukraine and a whole bunch of other things going on that they've all been now pardoned for, except for the old man himself. Joe did not pardon himself, apparently.
Why not?
I don't know. Maybe he forgot to. No one told him to. That's hilarious, right? Mr. President, these are all the pardons for all of us. And Joe's like,
Well,
okay,
he's probably
great.
not going to be alive for much longer, anyways.
Well, plus, I thought the courts have already determined that he's incompetent to stand trial.
Yes,
can you lock
I mean,
up
right? I
somebody with
mean,
dementia? Is that allowed?
at least the Democratic Party decided that he wasn't competent to stand for re-election.
There
And
was a prosecutor. There was a prosecutor made that determination when it came down to remember the classified files that he had out with the Corvette in the garage?
Yeah.
It's my Corvette.
They said they're not prosecuting because they couldn't get a jury to convict a senile old fart.
I mean, it's a good card to play. I mean, because it's a game that they're playing, right? They play with our world like it's their little toy, said the great 20th century philosopher Bob Dylan, something like that. And I think, Biden, his whole list of pardons proves it. Just the fact that people put squiggles on pieces of paper and people go in and out of cages, I think is a weird idea for a civilized world, but maybe we're not there yet, right? I think people going to trial and the jury not being informed about nullification and things like that, those powers of the juror, I think that's a little weird too, right? It's almost like you don't want justice to happen in those systems. Yeah, right? It's almost like it's a criminal justice system, a justice system run by criminals in some cases.
Or criminals, yeah.
Well, let's look at HSBC, right? Can I take you guys full screen for a second?
Please do.
Let's do it.
All right, I got something for you. Let's go here to here like this.
Whoa.
Once upon a time, the British East India Company had something called the Old China Trade, which was part of what they call free trade. Free trade was actually a system of slavery. Okay. And during the time in this Old China Trade, they were trading. They were taking American cotton over to Manchester, England to make textiles. They take that cotton over to India where they can't weave these types of designs. And they say, we want these designs. What can we trade you? And the British say, we get opium for these cottons. And then we take the opium over to China. And then we get things that the Chinese wouldn't give to the Western world. And we kind of take it by force. So while America had a great, Boston Tea Party, the Chinese on the other side of the world, about 50 years later, were dumping chests of opium from the East India Company into the drink. Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation is the first major and still existing banking corporation that facilitated all these types of activities. Now you've got other like subgroups that once opium was privatized in 1832, which is why Skull and Bones at Yale was formed in 1832, right? That was the privatization to a whole bunch of families to run the opium trade. So you're fast forwarding HSBC in the 20th century. Well, it's in a whole bunch of scandals. And there are some Hillary Clinton connections here because what happens is HSBC gets found guilty of laundering, let's say 30 billion, and they have to pay a fine of 10%, $3 billion. And HSBC pays that fine to the US government, and that money just disappears. No one knows where it went. It's like untrackable. I know this because I interviewed a whistleblower from HSBC called John Cruz. And while we were having that discussion, I asked him, I said, HSBC was found guilty. Part of the penalty was they put James Comey on the board of HSBC to oversee, make sure they don't do any more laundering, right? And then HSBC gave $100 million to the 2016 Hillary Clinton campaign. And there was a whole bunch of other things connected to that, right? So there's a ligature between Hong Kong Shanghai Bank Corporation, the opium syndicate, the FBI director, and the whole milieu of penalizing those types of groups. Because the whistleblower from HSBC was like, look, dude, this is really weird. And of course, you can't get anyone to interview a whistleblower like that because it's blowing the whistle on the same people that Ross was competing with Silk Road, allegedly, right? I'll still use the word allegedly out there because I don't know. I just heard things, right? So this syndicate still operates. In the book that came out, I don't know, like 30 years ago, I have a couple copies of it, but it looks like this. It's called Dope Inc., Britain's Opium War Against the World. It would educate you on the East India Company and HSBC, stuff like that. But what it says is this argument from this book that's been out for 30 years is that the East India Company opium syndicate was taken over by Kissinger Associates. And I said, that's a really far out claim, but maybe I should investigate it, right? So let me show you over here. If I were to go to Kissinger. Now, this model has over 10,000 of these entries with average of 5 reference links for each. Kissinger Associates happens to have a whole lot of East India Company, Eastern Establishment, Rockefeller Foundation type people, and a whole bunch of overlap with the events of 9/11. People that were involved in both sides of that conflict. Now, you can't learn too much about Kissinger Associates because we don't work there, right? But there's a guy who worked for Kissinger Associates, and he wrote this book. It's called Superclass, the Global Elite and the World They Are Making. He's also a Carnegie Foundation type guy. So he'll tell you there exists this group of people who are supranational. Their goals are farther than any nationalistic ideology. Their goals match up with what they call the New World Order and all these types of things. And they have top-down influence in our country, whether we like it or not. The Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Chrystia Freeland, she wrote a book called Plutocrats. Same type of idea, you know. These people have jets, we have cars. We're fighting over gas prices. They're telling us not to, you know, use energy because of climate change. They're flying around in their like Gulfstream jets, going to Davos and World Economic Forum and, you know, World Health Organization type of meetings. Again, it's like a layer of hypocrisy out there. If we are not ever told in a credible way that such things exist, then we create these big blind spots. And they may not affect us, but maybe our loved ones go out and they run into those blind spots, things that could have been known, but were just publicly denied because that's conspiracy theory. That's a pejorative, right? It's meant to stop people from thinking, from looking. It's a shield that they use to hide the truth from people, to occult the truth from people, to censor the truth from people. What is that they're hiding? The most useful information, because if you knew that, you would get your freedom back. And I think that brings us full circle back to Silk Road, where people were getting some freedom back, but they were competing against the already existing monopoly that was well set up. And, you know,
do you think
it still exists?
Do you think it was the drug trade or the use of Bitcoin that was that they considered the more dangerous threat to their business?
I think the drug trade probably got their attention because that was immediate hit on their books and infrastructure, whereas the crypto was more esoteric. But if you go back to the 1996 NSA MIT paper, you know, on cryptography, making your own mint, how to make a mint, something like that, where they called out the specs for here's a cryptographic type of currency that they could create. And then years later, Bitcoin emerged on the market. So I don't know, maybe Satoshi read that paper and was like, that's a good idea, but maybe they shouldn't own it. I don't know. So no one knows who Satoshi is.
But that's definitely, you know, I think it was that, to me, I always thought that combination of competing with prohibition and with the currency was just too big of a threat to ignore. That's why his sentence was more than any murderer, more than any other criminal that I've ever even heard of.
Bro, those two guys just got caught.
A threat to them.
They got caught down in Georgia. They had special needs kids that they were pimping out. They got 100 years. And I made the point on the show a couple weeks ago. I'm like, take in consideration, that's less time than Ross, right? So that just tells you on the scale of justice where these things rank. What those people did was horrible, but not as horrible as like combining those two things together, you know, like putting the volition and free will and informed consent back into the marketplace, right? Combined with, you know, a new type of cryptocurrency and creating that marketplace. The other side is scared by things they don't understand, right? They already don't understand freedom and want to destroy it. That's the whole of human history. So all they have is a hammer. So all they see are nails, right? So they see something they don't like or understand, or they, you know, that puts them in fear, and they use their means to try to smash it. And that's what's making their line of thought obsolete.
Yeah.
Their ideas are not going to survive into the future. That way of might makes right determines truth has gone the way of post-fact era. Those words become meaningless and have less resonance with people.
Well, that is one of the reasons Bitcoin is specifically a threat, because Bitcoin offers a record that is an immutable record of truth. that they can't interfere with. So I'm sure that does concern them quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, on the flip side, they're trying to freak everyone out with all the cryptographic breaking Willow type of chips, and they're going to be able to hack and do your thing. Okay, that seems like, first, if you crunch your numbers, they don't really make sense. Secondly, it seems like a desperate call for help because you can't compete against the ever increasing Bitcoin as it is right now, right? But that is the one thing probably on the, beyond Moore's law being, kind of obsolete. Those are things on the horizon that do present challenges. But for now, I say leverage things that work, and new things will be created by smart people as we go along.
Yeah. Did you ever
Yeah, I
read?
mean, Bitcoin can be adapted.
Did you ever
Bitcoin
read
can be adapted
Satoshi's?
to be resilient to quantum computing or whatever else is out there.
Right.
So,
It can have an immune system aspect to it if people understand the environmental stimuli.
Satoshi predicted the quantum computer thing, and he addressed it in emails or discussions. I wish I could read it directly, but he was like, well, there's two ways it could happen. Would be one, it's a gradual progression, and then we'll just change the encryption as needed. You know what I mean? Like once it's on the horizon, it'll be fine. And they said, well, if something suddenly happened, and suddenly things were broken.
but then everything is fucked, right? It's
Yeah,
just
but
Bitcoin,
then
it's
he suggested
every
you could.
security, RSA 256, 512, all of it's fucked.
Yeah,
So,
then he suggested there could be a freeze and a possible rollback if necessary, but you could still address it.
yeah, that's fair.
Look, what is a bigger threat? Is it that stuff we just talked about of a technical nature, or is it sometimes our mindset? So let me rewind a couple years. Let me take you back to like 2015. Bitcoin was $100. It had just gone down from like $200. I had 2 Bitcoins left. I said, I gotta get rid of these before they're not worth anything. And I sent, Drew Phillips bumper sticker money, and I got some bumper stickers printed. And now those bumper stickers are worth like $208,000. And when I hand them out to people, I'm like, this is a good lesson. This is a good lesson. Learn from my pain. These are very meaningful in a esoteric kind of a way. It's a lesson, and it's a hard lesson, but I'm not the only one. I mean, how many of my friends had Bitcoin back in the day and spent it and stuff like that? So you learn and you grow. And I remember at one point I bought a bunch of Doge, and it went up and down. And I just forgot about it. And then stuff happened to it years later. So sometimes they'll hold. So I've been, a holder, not a folder.
Well,
But,
even if people didn't spend their Bitcoin, they could have bought more and they didn't. So everybody has a certain amount of regrets, but that's what are you going to do?
Okay, so cost averaging is the answer, because then you don't feel the ups and downs so much, and don't look at it.
That's what I do. Yeah, hindsight is.
I've had friends and family get in at like a peak, and then they see it go down, and then they're like, they lose, and they get out instead of just waiting till it grows, because it's more of a long-term play.
You got to be able to stomach the ups and downs. You got to kind of understand what Bitcoin is, which is currently like a super volatile asset. So if you're gonna get into it, you have to be ready to be able to face like a 50% drop and then like 100% climb. Like this is just how it is right now, because the market's still trying to figure out the price, right?
Yeah,
you still don't have like even close to the level of adoption that it hopefully will see someday. So,
but they need all this electricity to be generated to run the AI.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be plenty of electricity to generate crypto too.
Tell us
But
about
technocracy, if you go back 100 years, technocracy was going to have an energy-based economy, which is very similar now to what you see them building with crypto and AI and Project Stargate and all their good plans for humanity.
Yeah, what is Project Stargate?
Okay, so check it out
earlier. Yeah.
All right. If we go back to 2006, my first production was May 31st, 2006, Project Constellation. In there is a whole bunch of stuff about my whistleblowing and 9/11 experiences. But amidst that, I was pointing toward the ever-growing technocracy, the panopticon, their use of AI, Oracle Corporation, Larry Ellison, and they needed, because I was the director of sales for an AI company back in 2003. So what they needed at that time were huge data sets to train the learning algorithms. And then in 2004, total information awareness from DARPA turns into Facebook, everybody's putting all their private stuff that they would never share. So if I rewind to 96, Larry Ellison said, here's this thing called network computing. No one's going to have a hard drive on the computer anymore. Everyone's going to put their stuff into this thing. They didn't call it a cloud, right? But everyone said, no, why would we ever take our personal data and put it up to a third party? So it failed, but it's exactly what turned into the cloud, right? So he's had this plan that they just implemented with Trump yesterday and Sam Altman called Project Stargate. And it's a DARPA mRNA platform for curing cancer and all these other things that they can do at $500,000 a dose, right? So DARPA's involved. Larry Ellison's involved. Larry Ellison's Oracle Corporation started as a DoD project.
Wait, can I just pause you for a second?
Go ahead. Yeah.
This is going by so fast.
Sorry.
Is this a medical program or a weapons program?
Yes.
Bioweapons.
Just like, hold up here. Wait a minute.
It-
DARPA.
It turns your body into a little biolab, just like other mRNA technologies are designed to do. That's what DARPA does, right? So DARPA came up with mRNA. They licensed it to Moderna in 2012, 2013. That runs you up through the pandemic. Now they want to use that same platform. Since everyone's already got the little factory in their body, they're like, oh, by the way, we have new features. Now, cut to Larry Ellison. So first off, let me rewind. Oracle Corporation, one of the world's biggest corporations. They do web servers and databases, stuff like that. It started as a DoD CIA project because CIA had this aging guy with dementia called James Jesus Angleton, known as the Oracle. And the Oracle had all this espionage data in his head, and they needed something better than a file cabinet and paper to protect it. So they created a relational database. The guy I worked for at the AI company in 2003 was on that team back in the 60s, and he saw it get handed off to Ellison. So I know from firsthand, and you can also look it up, like it's well known now. But back when I disclosed it in 2006, that was not well known information. So Oracle Corporation has long had a plan for that type of data processing. And where's my Zbigniew Brzezinski? I have a ton of Zbigniew Brzezinski books from the 60s and 70s. And basically he was studying, because he comes from Poland, he was studying the Eastern Bloc. And what he said was that the communists, like for instance, the Stasi in Germany, the Stasi could collect information on people in enormous amounts, but they couldn't process it or marshal that. So in the 1970s, they called for developing the computer technology to actually take the surveillance data and give them real-time analysis on people. All they've been trying to do is make Minority Report. All Minority Report is Jeremy Bentham's panopticon from the East India Company. Like, there has been a system of slavery, only the technology has changed. And Ellison is heard in this corporate meeting. I have the clip. I'm going to play it on Sunday night. He says, with this new mRNA platform, they're going to be able to surveil everything and everybody from the inside out. And he describes a total, you know, for lack of a better term, panopticon, which was a type of prison system where you're totally surveilled 24/7. You can't see that you're surveilled, so it's just like the paranoia that keeps people in line. But the system of having the people guard themselves through fear is a gist of it. But they back it up with the technical specialities to be able to know more about you, have a better avatar of you than you know about yourself, and thus they can do things like parallel construction, and they can give their people a break and let other people slide into the guilty seat.
Wow.
Okay, here it comes. So what, do we just not take the shot, or is it going to be transmitted on 5G, or like what
Well, I mean,
water, what is it?
Let me answer your question with a short story. In 2004, after I had witnessed 9/11, after I had become a whistleblower, in 2004, I was trying to figure out who to vote for because I didn't know any better. And this is where my learning experience started. I had two choices. I had Skull and Bones opium syndicate brother, George W. Bush, or I had Skull and Bones opiate syndicate brother, John Kerry. I didn't like either of those options. So I was watching C-SPAN, keeping my options open. And I saw this debate. And one of these guys was a guy from the Libertarian political party. I didn't even know about libertarian philosophy. I didn't know anything at this point. So he's libertarian candidate, Michael Badnarik. And he said all this stuff that made so much sense. It was totally logical, reasonable. I was like, this is the shit right here. I'm voting for this guy. And I did. I voted for him in 2004. And from there, I discovered, von Mises and Hayek and Rothbard and all the good people along the way, right? Ron Paul. Yeah. Later on, when I kicked off my autonomy course, one of the students came and said, you know who needs this course? I said, who? He said, Michael Badnarik. I said, the guy who ran for president? He's like, yeah. I said, you know him? He said, yeah. I said, how well? He said, he stays at my house. I said, call him. I want him to teach his Constitution class to my students, right? So Michael gets in, he makes a lot of friends, and the ability to communicate in simple ideas, the way of freedom was the way forward. Very influential. He passed away not long ago. And he had a saying, and he would say this all the time. And I would always be like, dude, that's a little too, but he said it like this. He said it this was before COVID happened. Keep in mind, they were just talking about vaccinating kids and taking away religious exemption. He said, and I'm pretty much quoting him, for parents who are scared that the state is going to vaccinate your child, you bring them to me. He said, I will stand between your child and the state with my 45. And he's like, and they can bring their syringe and I'll bring my 1911 and we'll see what makes a bigger hole. End quote.
Badass. Yeah.
He's a total alpha male. John Wayne acted like those dudes. He was that guy, right? He could walk the walk. And because he did, he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. There's a lot of sensitive libertarians, people who are really into statism and corrupting the political philosophy of libertarianism, right? You have certain characters who might even run that party over the years that drove good people like him away and made them very just like disenchanted, right? Not demoralized, but disenchanted. Like Badnarik said, running for president for the Libertarian Party was the worst decision he ever made in his life. That guy was a legit genius. He wrote software that ran Diablo Canyon nuclear plant. He's like a polymath, right? And so to get mistreated like that by, lovers of liberty,
Lolberts,
right?
Lolberts, yeah.
Well, I
So,
remember
yeah.
I remember when he was campaigning for the LP nomination. He was him and John Earhart like driving around in an old Nissan or whatever. Like they put 100,000 miles on John's car. And just like it basically was like, hey, we're coming, and like we'd throw together meetups, and he'd like stay at our house, and like on nothing. He was he'd go to Staples and print out copies of his manuscript, right? That people could buy. Like you could buy his book, but he was literally like self-publishing at Staples at like every stop. Like
He was a hardcore through and through America believer, hot dogs, apple pie, grandma, all that stuff was just like, it was almost like he was living beyond his age, right? The times were changing and he was very set in his ways of thinking about freedom, because he did come from an age where people took it much more seriously than the people he was trying to deal with, right? He would get frustrated when he's trying to teach his Constitution class that people aren't interested in knowing their rights. He's like, how can they possibly defend their rights or know if the government's doing their job if they don't even know what their rights? I'm like, Michael, I agree, bro. This is why we got to get your word out there, And I think there was a lot of years probably wasted because people like him weren't being given the ability to get their word to bigger places, right? I never saw Alex Jones say, Michael, come on and teach my multi-million person audience their rights. But maybe it happened. Maybe I missed that episode back in the day. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just like, I never saw Tucker Carlson helping Ross and telling the jury about jury nullification. I never saw that happen. Maybe it happened. I don't know. But there's people with big audiences, and then there's people who are close to the truth. And sometimes those audiences mix, but oftentimes there's a lot of struggle for people trying to get the word out. And, I always grew up thinking Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post, they're the place. Those are serious journalistic places. If there's whistleblowers, they would be telling us about them, right? And then when I became a whistleblower, I watched 3 Days of the Condor. And that scene at the end where they tell Robert Redford's like, I'm going to the New York Times with this. And the guy from the CIA is like, what if they don't print it? meaning they owned it, right? It's Operation Mockingbird, bro. So, that parallax view, they made a whole bunch of discouraging films for whistleblowers. Even most recently, there was like something Gardner, the Constant Gardener. I remember watching that and I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ, dude.
The Constant Gardener.
Yeah, it was like 15 years ago, that type of thing. So it's been a tough road to hoe for freedom. I was a whistleblower in 2003 under the federal Sarbanes-Oxley Act. I worked for a big tech company that was being acquired. We had a product that was mandated by Congress to protect companies from espionage and financial fraud. So Enron, Tyco International, Anderson Consulting, all those big scandals happened back in the day. Congress wanted to do something to prevent that from happening again, because Dennis Kozlowski made a big mess. So they said, we're going to install this software that prevents companies from communicating outside of this audit trail. And the audit trail will be preserved to write once, read many, long-term storage. I was selling a product that was mandated by Congress that companies had to buy us or IBM. So for a software sales executive, I thought this was pretty easy business. I got all trained up on the project and the product, and I went to a meeting. I'd worked there for like 2 weeks, and Tyco International was one of my accounts. Well, they're in trouble. So I'm like, this is a sure thing, slam dunk deal, right? So I meet with their general counsel for the entire global organization, and I say, our software allows you to, preserve all these data files that the FBI and SEC are wanting from you during this investigation. And she said, I don't want to know how to preserve this information. I want to know how to delete it and make it look like it was never there.
Obviously.
Yeah.
I'm from Beaver, Pennsylvania. Those words hit me like a brick in the face. I was like, what? And my tech guy who had worked at the company for a while was like, oh, we could talk about that offline. I could talk to you. And I was like, what's going on here? So I didn't know, but I had a suspicion. The merger was going through in a couple of days. It was a multi-billion-dollar merger. And my executives had asked me to falsify my sales forecast. And when you falsify a sales forecast that's being used during a bidding process and negotiation for a company, I felt that was wrong. And I resisted and I pushed back against that. So it was like that little resistance plus Tyco International led me into August of 2003. I went down to, there's a company in Maryland that safeguards the stock market, the National Association of Securities Dealers. They've now since changed their title, but that's what it was, NASD. And I showed them the product. I expect them to buy the product. I drove to Maryland from New York City to sell you this product. You guys need it? You want it? I'm here. I have it. Let's do business. And they say across the table, this product has a back door in it. This product does the opposite of what you're telling me it does. My management's in the room. And so I'm like, dude, what do you guys got going on here? Because I've been at the company at that point like 6 weeks. And so as I start escalating concern, I start getting retaliation. And by October of 2003,
So wait, how did they know it had a back door? So the company did like their due diligence on
yeah,
the product?
they had a demo. They had a demo and they were running tests when we got there. Like I still have those dudes' cards. I could name them off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not trying to dox them, but like,
No, I believe you.
These guys said, well, and I'm not looking to like leave my cushy sales job either.
Yeah.
But in the face of like, I don't need the money that bad to be compromised like this. Right. So there was a couple other instances. So I finally called the SEC, who was investigating my company at that time. I called the lawyer in San Francisco that's running the case. And I'm like, dude, I'm seeing this stuff and there's like untoward back, I don't want to say it's illegal because I'm not a lawyer, but this is stuff is highly unethical and is like off the books being hidden. Like there's something going on. And he says, we could put you in prison for sharing this information outside the company. And it was like one of those movies where the call's coming from inside the house.
Yeah.
I was like, dude. And my wife was like, dude, what are you doing? Like the SEC's like protecting them. Right. So I blew the whistle on November 4th, 2003, and then went through court case pro bono against them for like 4 or 5 years. They're now, the company now is EMC Dell. So it's like the biggest tech company in the world. I didn't know at the time the political landscape. right? I just knew they were doing things wrong, and that by the book, I was trained how to be a whistleblower in the product because I had to train my clients how to do that. So when they did all these things, I'm like, dude, you guys just checked all the boxes. I have to do this other thing. So I scuttled a multi-million-dollar career because I thought they were ripping off not only the other company that was purchasing, but all these companies that were being infected with these backdoors. What do you put a backdoor into a publicly traded company for, if not to launder money through that company without them knowing it, right? And when they were already doing that sort of thing with other, like I had a client called DynCorp. I had a client called Northrop Grumman that was working with DynCorp, and there was a whole bunch of.
They're a huge military contractor.
They were I'm seeing news that they're sex trafficking human beings at the same time. Like, yes,
they're all over like the world. Like they're they're.
So I had no education when I encountered any of that, and so naively, like it was the right thing to do, and I'd go back and do it again, even though it didn't have the result I was seeking. I got $1 million education out of pulling that lever and blowing the whistle. I went up pro se against it's one of the world's largest law firms. It's a multi-billion-dollar law firm called Skadden Arps. When the United States government gets in trouble with Iran-Contra and BCCI, they go to Skadden Arps. So the company that I was going after for the back door and the other things they were doing, they were protected by Skadden Arps. And I had no idea who that firm was, but the first night of the trial, I testified the whole first day for like 8 hours. I came home and I was reading The House of Morgan by Ron Chernow. And in there, he says, in the 1940s and 50s, JP Morgan wanted to engage in hostile takeover work that their white glove WASP law firm, it was like Polk and Wardell, wouldn't engage in. So JP Morgan found like a rogue firm that would engage in such hostile takeovers, and they were called Skadden Arps, Marr and Flom. And I was like, shit, these are the guys I'm up against again tomorrow in court. So I tried to get smart real quick, but I mean, when they offered to settle before I went to trial, and I have the evidence. Of course you're going to offer to settle. I'm going to go in, I'm going to prove it, and I'm going to, win the day. And 9 months later, they're like, thanks for playing, but you lose. And at that point, I'd already seen enough that I'm like, it's a rigged game. And I might as well just move on with my life and try to figure out, like, what did I just bump into? Right. And it's like the 10 blind men and the elephant. It's like, I just bumped into some stuff. I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's connected. And if we go and look and start to educate ourselves on the history and evolution of these institutions, oh yeah, there's a lot more connections. And so that was one of my interesting character building experiences along the way, for sure.
That's wild. Geez. So like so it was the SEC that just basically had a backdoor. It was just like a whole money laundering operation between all these, like, what came about it? You got a settlement? Like I
lost.
Like you lost and that was it?
Yeah. There's no settlement. You can appeal to go back through the same process you just got wrung out by. When I saw I'm in Hartford, and the plaintiffs, the defendants, rather, were from Boston, right? They were a big Boston tech company before they got sold to Dell. Okay. And they brought their own judge from Boston to Hartford. And when I saw the other side in the hallway, and the judge was looking at the Super Bowl rings of the guys from the other side, because my company had a bunch of ex-NFL guys working in software for some reason. And the company CEO, my boss's boss, he was a former NFL player who falsified his college education and his MBA, or just his MBA, to become the CEO of a publicly traded company. And that is like supposed to be a federal offense. And I called the registrar to verify he never went there. And when I brought that, who was
the player? Can you name it? Can you name him or no?
What was his name? This is it wasn't a famous player. But if the name comes to me,
no, it's not a big deal. I was just curious. Yeah.
And here's the gist: this guy was not qualified to run a publicly traded company that was being sold for $2 billion, right? And when I dug into, I'm like, am I working in a gangster cartel syndicate? Because it's like there's a whole bunch of nonsense that I've not really encountered in other companies. I've worked other companies, but I worked a lot of small startups, 30 people, 300 people, 3,000 people, kind of that range of companies. I'd never seen anything like that. And then when, by the time I got to the SEC guy and he told me that, I was like, dude, just like, you're so far off the map that college gave you right now, you better just stop and read before you make any more moves. And that's how I started getting collected of the evidence and artifacts. Yeah, you got to find out, who's running this place for real. Because if the justice system doesn't work the way you think it does, and the political system is not working the way you think, and the economic system you see is at threat, like they can use those back doors anytime they want. They don't have to use them all the time. They could just have them for like a rainy day when they want to do some sort of Fight Club, crash everything type of deal. But, being young and naive is part of the gig.
Mm-hmm. Got to start somewhere, right?
That was 20 years ago. So now I'm just old and naive.
What about this Trump executive order about the CBDCs? We were talking about that a little bit before you came on, I think.
Yeah, I think he wants to. That's not his idea. So he'll probably come out. I mean, he just came out with Trump coin, right? They'll have their own brand or spin. Yeah. CBDC was a good idea, but now here's Trump coin. And so it's not necessarily out of the frying pan or into the fire. It's like maybe a bit of both, because the pseudo anonymous part of Bitcoin can still cause issues out there, right? The aspects that come with CBDC, they just want to create social credit score system, for lack of a better term, right? That's what Elon wants to do with X, that he wants to make it into the WeChat for the Western world and have everything metered and rated through there. And Ellison and the rest of the globalists, I mean, they know their panopticon type of control, like total surveillance state, rests upon those types of things, because they don't have it yet, but they're pretty damn close to having it, right? But at the same time they're getting closer, people are doing, open phones and all sorts of other things, VPNs. They're starting to kind of like get smart that they were the product the whole time for the AI to be trained, right? So like I've said about the globalists for the past 20 years, they're not changing their plan anytime soon. Like they chose they're like an aircraft carrier. They chose their direction and their tactics and their strategies, and that's basically all they can do. And I think in the last 4 or 5 years, they bit off a lot more than they've been able to chew. I think they thought they would have an easy lockdown for 3 to 5 years. Like I had someone call me. I did a business meeting, right? In February, it was probably February of 2020. And it was one of the scariest things. He said, here's business opportunity. All restaurants are going to be closed for the next 3 to 5 years. They will not be able to have people sitting at tables in their restaurants. If they want to survive, they have to restructure for takeout. I want you to go in hazmat suit and a mask. And this is a big business opportunity. You could have a whole territory of like helping I was like, dude, this is fucking nonsense. I'm like, first off, the pandemic's not going to be that bad. And I think this is a bunch of fear mongering. He worked at Microsoft. That's how he had this information, right? So he saw it as he's not going to be working at Microsoft anymore. He's going to, he was putting out freelance opportunities to kind of syndicate, seeing what was going to happen. And I was like, I don't want any, like, even if we're going to be locked down for 3 to 5 years, I'm not locking my mind into that plan right now. Right. I hope for the best. Maybe this all goes away. Maybe it's not a bioweapon. Maybe they will let us have freedom, So, but in hindsight, I was like, that dude was definitely with some people who were doing some things about, like, they weren't subject to the panic. They were subject to the predation and the premeditation of, we're going to make everyone panic and we can all enrich ourselves from it. Right. Where did Elon become the richest person in the world? Pretty sure it was during the pandemic. Right. People like Larry Ellison and Bill Gates were there for a long time. Bezos is only there because of government subsidizing, and so is Elon, right? And Ellison and Microsoft and like they're all government subsidized. So let's just go there. In-Q-Tel. Do we need to talk about it? Or do you guys, your audience savvy to that, right? None of those things are authentic, garage created. Like I'll leave Steve Jobs and Wozniak alone because Wozniak prints his own $2 bills and gets away with it, right? I've communicated with Wozniak back in the day. He's a smart guy, but he's a Freemason. I think he might be Trilateral Commission friendly, which is who came in and fired Steve Jobs from Apple in the first place, right? The same guy that fired Steve Jobs fired Anthony Sutton from the Hoover Institute back in the 70s because of his trilateral research. So those people are real people and do take real actions in the marketplace to people that you consider to be real famous. I would say they're substantial and meaningful to the narrative and history that's unfolding. We should know about them, be educated about our opposition. But that's just me. We got ourselves a reader here.
I wanted to say earlier, your charts really put the conspiracy meme from Always Sunny in Philadelphia to shame.
Bro, they can't hold a candle. Mine's interactive. You know where I learned how to do
a whole nother level.
Where can we like go down the rabbit hole on this? You just...
Well, first off, is there a chat? I'll drop you this link right now, and you can just click
oh,
on it.
hell yeah. There we go.
Right, let me go.
Private chat.
Copy web thought. And then is there like
what
right there?
What software is this?
All right, it's called the Personal Brain, and it's at thebrain.com. I've used it since 2008. This model that we're cruising is from 2008 to present. It has 50,000 links, 10,000 thoughts, and I don't have to add too much to it except like current events I connected into the infrastructure. Basically, there's a critical mass of information, and once you understand that, all the other news stories that are happening today are just driven by that engine. So if you understand,
we just have AI scan those links and then just like tell us how to free ourselves from this stuff. Scan it all, look for weaknesses, and
who do we attack?
This is just how I had to educate myself. You know, putting this together is me saying who's Kissinger associates, who influenced them, and what have they done. And then off to the side over here on the left, you've got like media that would teach you about it. So you're going to have some Corbett report, some Truth Stream, various other elements it might connect into. But you're going to have like sometimes news articles, right? We could look at this one, the vault below ground zero, all the missing gold and stuff that from that day that no one talks about, and who was in control of those things while the box cutter guys were making everyone look 1,000 feet up above the vaults that were being raided, right? If I don't categorize and put the references with it, what are my chances using a search engine of finding these things when I need to show someone the evidence?
Never.
Right? It looks a lot better than the,
very
the
hard
Charlie meme.
Yeah, Charlie, I mean, he didn't have the advantage. My first 4 jobs sold data modeling tools for databases. So I knew about the power of data modeling to understand very complex pieces of infrastructure. And then I had all these names and dates and people that they associated with. And I was like, okay, if I keep it in my head, I can remember it and regurgitate it. If I put it in the model, I can share it and present it. And where I learned that was, where's my boy? Where's the big book? Is it here? Is he here? Mark Lombardi was a conceptual artist in the late 90s and early 2000s. And I have a book of his printed by the Judith Rothschild Foundation because it's posthumous of his art. He died of his own hand on 3/22/2000. So, Skull and Bones Day. He was looking into the Skull and Bones drug network, the Bush family, the Bin Ladens. He had mapped it all out. When 9/11 happened, the FBI went to the Whitney Museum. The Whitney family is also part of that opium syndicate. That's why they owned Lombardi's work. And the FBI went there and said, can we see Lombardi's work? And they said, maybe. And they wanted to trace the connections. So if I could find Global Networks by Mark Lombardi, someone moved it, probably me. On the front cover, it's a conceptual diagram that looks kind of like this. And it's like, James Bath is the banker for Osama bin Laden and Salim bin Laden, and they're doing business with the Bush family. And I was like, so I was doing this type of modeling of data. A buddy of mine comes over. He said, I just saw this art exhibit that kind of looks like what you're doing. I said, fascinating. Tell me all about it. He tells me all about it. He's like, at first you just see all these things and then you walk up and it's all these names and people and connections. And I'm like, this is crazy. This is crazy coincidence. I want to meet him. He said, oh, you can't. I said, why? He said, well, he's dead. I said, how'd he die? Oh, well, very suspicious suicide. Like he was about to have his game-changing art exhibit. And then someone turned the sprinklers on in his apartment, ruined all his art. And then he spent like the last 48 hours recreating all that art and then decided to like kill himself before the whole thing. And then no one ever saw his art, and it went off the market. It's owned by the Jewish Museum, the Whitney Museum.
Wait,
and I think
by who? It's owned by who?
Yeah, you heard me. They're great collectors of the Mark Lombardi art, and Judith Rothschild Foundation prints the book called Global Networks, and it's a great big kind of coffee table book. I can't believe I'm not prepared for this. So rarely can I not find a book, but that's got me right now. So he drew it on paper, 8-foot murals. Like, you can't share that and you can't click that, bro. But on this, I can share and click, and I can add attachments, and I can bring other people to the research that I've been doing studiously for the past 20 years, because the problems that I was figuring out back then, like the answers I found, I haven't had to change my answers in the whole, once I found here's what makes sense, I'm willing to consider many other angles, and I'm willing to consider I'm wrong. But that stuff hasn't been brought to the table yet. What has been brought to the table is like, people want to talk about subsections of a bigger animal that is very knowable. Like they write all about themselves. They have names for their own, their coterie of people. They don't call themselves the superclass. They call themselves the power elite by Oxford, C. Wright Mills, 1958. So the power elite are a real group of people who do have international influence. David Rockefeller in his memoirs on page 408 says, some people accuse me and my family of being internationalists and un-American activities. He's like, if charged, I stand guilty of that. He said that in 2001. The Twin Towers are Nelson and David. Like, those are the Rockefeller brothers built into construction in the skyline of New York City. So there's a longer history to 9/11 and what was being done. And, it wasn't accidental that all these boxes got checked that day just by some guys with box cutters. You got a global war on terror. You got a Patriot Act and surveillance on American citizens and taking your shoes off the airport and all these other things that Americans never would have tolerated. And at the same time, you had a whole bunch of things that made me say, how did the guys with the box cutters do that? Example, insider trading on my client, another client of mine, and the airline that intersected my client. Who knew that? How did the guys with the box cutters know American Airlines is going to intersect Marsh and McLennan to do put options the week before, right? Mm-hmm. And then when you trace those put options that were placed, they go back to the number 3 at CIA who's working at Deutsche Bank or whatever, right? They weren't interested in that. The lawyers investigating 9/11, trying to help the families, they weren't interested that it doesn't just go to the Saudis. It's like, if you follow that Saudi money, it comes back to Americans and intelligence agencies and MI6 and Israel, right?
Or those insane, that insurance policy that Silverstein took out on the buildings, like,
what a coincidence
prior. And what was it? What was the trillion that were missing from the
2.3?
The audit.
Yeah.
So
I mentioned this back in 2006. So I'm like, September 10th, 2001, the day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld announced $2.3 trillion was missing. Why would you announce bad news at a press conference on a Monday? You would usually do it on a Friday.
Yeah, because
unless that there's a big event coming Tuesday that's going to wipe everyone's memory of that 2.3 trillion. By the way, the accounting office that was investigating the $2.3 trillion missing was in the recently reinforced part of the Pentagon that happened to get intersected by whatever blew it up that day, right? Just coincidences like that. That's another, I have the article for that because it's by Milan Simovich of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette or Pittsburgh Press. So when you find these artifacts through time, you want me to find it? Check this out. That's the power of a database. Army History Unit piecing together Pentagon attack, December 16th, 2001 by Milan Simonich, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And if you were to click into that article and go to my browser, let's see if it comes up. Oh, method not allowed. So I know it exists. I know the title of it. I can go to the Wayback Machine with this link and find it, right? So even though sometimes things change as history goes on, the trillions of dollars missing, there's more to be seen to it than meets the eye, right? So there's a whole bunch of things I learned from that experience too, because prior to the whistleblowing experience, I used to have an office in the North Tower of the World Trade Center, and I saw the events that morning up until the South Tower exploded, at which point I left, got the fuck out of Dodge, and started calling people and be like, the world is.
You were in war. The day it happened?
I wasn't in the buildings, but I was driving down to the buildings, and I drove from my apartment on 87th and Riverside down West Side Highway to the trade centers.
You lived up on the west, Upper West Side? Okay.
Yeah. And
I'm driving down and you saw it go down.
Right. And I'm in a convertible 911. So I have the top down. And if a plane flew over my head at that speed, at that altitude, I would expect to have heard it, but I heard nothing.
There was no
And-
planes.
I mean, I'm not saying there's no planes.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying from my personal experience, I didn't pick up on it until there's a building with smoke coming out that I'm about to go to. And I'm like, oh, the place I'm about to go to is on fire. Fire department should be getting here soon. Like the sprinklers are going to put it out. Like, and so my naivete ended when the South Tower blew up, and I was between Trade Center 7 and 6, and South Tower is like right here. And I'm watching this fire. So I'm like rubbernecking like this, watching this fire. And I have to keep moving because traffic is moving slowly. So I had to keep moving a little bit. And when the second tower blew up, I saw these flashes go off in Trade Center 6. And between that and that and that, I was like in full on panic mode, like I'd never been in my life. And got out through the Holland Tunnel and drove to see some friends in Jersey to be like, turn on the TV. And they're like, what's going on? You know? And then when I saw the towers come down, not long after I got there, guys, it's 220 square acres of concrete reinforced with rebar that turns into dust in like 20 seconds. And I saw that and my brain was just like, with the engineering and science background that I do have, my brain was just like, that doesn't compute. That's what is going on. But I had no like, here's what's going on for, you know, quite a while. I just knew, I just saw some stuff that's not right. And the people who claim to be in control, I don't know if they're like, you know, Bush and those guys, like when Bush flew around to Offutt Air Force Base that day, and Buffett's having his last annual golf tournament, and Ann Tatlock from Fiduciary Trust, whose offices are in World Trade Center 2, that blew up with the second incident, right? So that her office blows up. She's with Warren Buffett at the place where Bush goes later. You don't think Buffett's like, hey, thank you for accepting our invitation, Ann, right? If you'd have gone to work today, you'd be dead. Huh, how lucky. Good thing Silverstein didn't go to his meeting at Windows on the World that morning, right? The person who tried to put me at the building that morning stayed home and did his meeting from conference call. So they put people in the building. And that is, so I'll go one step further. I'm not going to name him because he's still alive and there's Mossad and CFR connections. But he's good friends with Larry Silverstein. And they have, you know, they have regular meetings together. Let me say it like that. I didn't, public school did not educate me to deal with that circumstance. Neither did my Penn State education. And yeah, those were tough lessons to learn and sit through and put together over a series of years into a non-contradictory understanding of the situation. Who, how, why, where, when. And, you know, when you show me someone who can adjudicate it and bring them to justice, I can give you more details. But what I found out was the people you think are in charge that you could go to prosecute this are the ones who benefited and are in control of that crime. So
well, how could it be prosecuted? You know,
well,
like,
you know, in the olden days, if the United States government didn't do it, you could go to them and maybe they do something about it. But when it's the US, the UK, Israel, and NATO, bro, who are you going to go to? The UN? They like those things created the UN as their toy.
So where is like for those that like had any like hope of justice, like for a Nuremberg trial or like some kind of grassroots, like I mean, I just feel like vigilante justice isn't going to be nearly enough. But these crimes have to be laid out and the facts laid bare, the names named, the accomplices identified. It's going to take years and years and years just to sift through the crimes of the past 3 years.
You're right. And the proof of that is it took, you know, almost 70 years to get the JFK stuff released that just came out today.
And it's still not released.
Right. It's still not released. It's still not going to be in complete detail because I'm going to go through it when they release it and be like, what's up with this? And, you know, it's all nice. You show us this, but are you showing us the other part too? Because I think the other part is very meaningful, right? Who's the first one that came up with a, you know, conspiracy theory? Wasn't it Bertrand Russell? There was Bertrand Russell, I think, was questioning the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Who wrote the memo that said Oswald did it? A Rhodes Scholar, a Cecil Rhodes Scholar, an American loyal to Oxford and the British Empire, just like Bill Clinton, just like Stephanopoulos. just like Rachel Maddow, just like any number of directors from the CIA, any number of Phi Beta Kappa people that are in our intelligence agencies. Like there's an established set of tentacles that are not American that have, I mean, that's our entire intelligence agency structure, not going back to O&I, but OSS, CIA, NSA, those were all creations of the empire that was trying to take us back into it as part of Cecil Rhodes's last will and testament. He said the way the British can take over the world is to get America back into the empire. To do that, they have to stop being an empire and become a commonwealth. All these things were figured out along the way. We got married in World War II with the special agreement. And from there, we were off to the races. There's nothing that GCHQ or MI6 doesn't have a hand in our, you know, and if you want to go back to the Silk Road case, what was the meeting in Guam all about? You know?
I don't know.
What was the meeting in Guam?
What was that?
There was a meeting in Guam between CIA and Mark Karpellis back in the day, but Guam's a, you know, MI6 territory. When you got multiple intelligence agencies meeting with people who plausibly might have.
Who's Mark Karpellis?
I think he created something called Mount Gox back in the day.
Oh, that was the Mount Gox guy?
Well, Guam is known for being infested with vipers.
Well,
That's
it's an it's an intelligence hub of the Five Eyes variety, right? So I think it's just short-sighted for Americans to think it was only American intelligence that was going after, you know, Assange and people like Ross. It's like it's an international cartel, and you know, until people know about it in larger numbers, there isn't much to do but be subject to it. And for a long time.
Do you think they cared that Ross got out, or do you think they got their pound of flesh, they got their Bitcoin?
I think they got bigger things to worry about right now, which is one of the ways you get a political prisoner out of prison. They have other fires to fight right now. I mean, Macron's going down. A lot of their projects are going down in flames right now, you know? And I think the wake up process has continued far beyond COVID. And they didn't really expect that type of momentum. They expect the type of momentum to be like, oh, if the Daily Show just goes back, people will watch it. No. We all remember what happened during the pandemic. We all remember you wanted to send the people who didn't take the vaccine to the camps. We all remember you told people it was safe and effective. We all remember you said, can't go see your loved ones, can't kiss grandma goodbye because, you know, she's been here 90 years and she needs to die alone, okay, for our safety. We remember all of that stuff. And we may forgive, but we're never going to forget. And we're certainly not going to be that stupid again to let you get so many steps before we draw. That's all.
Yeah,
we're going to keep the social distance to a social distance. And when you encroach beyond that, it becomes, you know, a different type of situational awareness encounter.
Yeah.
Yeah, they jumped the shark for sure.
Yeah.
There's one.
You know where that comes from?
No.
Happy Days was getting.
Yeah, Fonzie.
Right, Fonzie jumps the shark. All right, we're all old enough to get that. All right, good.
Yeah, we all know that.
Yeah,
I was there. I was
there.
Babs was there.
I was there watching it
Fonz.
prime time.
I guess like one last thing. I mean, I don't know. This is probably just another distraction by the powers that be. We haven't heard any drone talk lately, but Jared, you want to pull this up? So this is what's coming in 2025. Apparently there's a bunch of whistleblowers, and I don't know, Richard, if you could confirm or deny, or UAP alien disclosure in 2025 clip. So yeah, like it's just another distraction. I mean, look, those drones just magically went away. We haven't heard much about them. Our Twitter feed isn't flooded with it, but
the alien drones with the FAA.
Yeah, so listen to all these goofies
The American
here.
people are ready to receive the truth.
Humanity is not the only intelligence in the universe.
Humanity is not the only intelligent species.
We are absolutely not alone. Non-human intelligence exists.
UAPs are real, they're here, and they're not human. I spent 25 years as a senior official with the CIA.
I've worked on highly classified UAP programs.
28 years as an astrophysicist.
I served as the 4th Director of National Intelligence.
Director of Aviation Security in the National Security Council.
The 1-star admiral after 32 years of service.
People that come forward with this. The American.
So, a bunch of spooks to distract us.
All right. Okay, so where do we
I'm an
start with this?
astrophysicist.
I have a set of criteria.
Depend on aliens.
Yeah, I have a set of criteria for evidence and things that I consider to be real, and it starts with the law of identification. And if there's nothing to be identified and no words on it yet, there's nothing. It's much ado about nothing. You're literally talking about no thing. Now, have people seen things that they can't explain? Yeah. Do we have agencies that have had trillions of dollars in slush funds to make whatever they want for the past 80 years and maybe even get technology from themselves in the future and send it back to the past, right? Is Roswell aliens? Is it the Russians, or is it Northrop Grumman from the year 2075 sending something to Northrop Grumman in 1947 saying reverse engineer this shit and get a jump on the Russians or whatever, right? I've looked at history over the
kind of a Terminator scenario.
Since we've had written history, the only thing I've seen is human beings playing tricks on other human beings for positions of power, right? There may be aliens. I haven't seen good evidence of it yet.
Space is making gay anyways.
If they're smart enough to like cross intergalactic space, they'd be smart enough to just keep going.
Dude, right?
You know?
I mean,
what have they got to gain from fucking around with human beings?
Now, these people that think they've seen
STDs.
something, they spin people up all the time with half truths and things like that. Like the government's done psyops on its own people to the point where their people committed suicide and stuff like that because they thought the aliens were coming. Like they'll do that to people, right? So can some of these people think they saw or overheard, but it's something else that is put there as part of psychological warfare? Because I don't know about the aliens. I don't know if aliens are real. I know psychological warfare is definitely real. There's a long history of our tax dollars being used against it, and those tax dollars techniques being aimed back at the American people, especially since the 2014 Smith-Mundt Act that makes it legal for the United States government to propagandize its own people.
Yep.
So what I have seen in my 51 years of experience here on this planet, I got over half a century of experience on this planet. I've seen defense contractors outside the government, U.S. government contractors, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, right? Like the world is controlled by arms dealers. It's the U.S. and the U.K. are the world's largest arms dealers, and they have a war economy that they grow in power from, right? So in these elements, they have things that no president, no senator has been read in on, right? I had a conversation one time. I was interviewing for a job right after 9/11. And the CEO from that company was a Turkish guy named Ali Kute. And he used to work at Lockheed Martin. Lockheed. Yeah, it was Lockheed. And he said the government would come to them every year and say, we need updated tracking ability because the thing you built us last time isn't fast enough to track these things, right? So you got Uncle Sam going to the place that probably makes the thing that they can't track in the first place, and then keep getting these loops of contracts of like, give them something too slow to track our new thing, and they have to keep upgrading. So there's part of that going on out there too, right? There are weapons and technologies that have not been given to the public. Can we all understand that? Like everything in our cell phone started with the military 60 years ago. So they're ahead. They're more advanced. They hold a knowledge gap, a power gap, a wealth
they
gap.
were using emojis in 1948. Like it's true.
It was on the Enigma machine. There was a little smiley face right there. So it's not to say that they're unbeatable or we shouldn't even try. It's just to say you have to respect that your enemy has been on the field for a long time, has a great deal of preparation, motivation, momentum, and funding. But what they can't do is adapt, evolve, or overcome. They are the Goliath to our David. So we are small and agile, and they are big and lethargic. And we can move in ways of freedom and innovation and ingenuity and inventions further away from their tyranny than they can precipitate it on us. We are the vanguard of embracing freedom and consciousness, and they are always trying to catch something that is ever moving ahead of them that they don't understand. This is what game theory was when John Nash and those guys, von Neumann, were running the Macy conferences back in the 50s, and they're trying to do like the early cybernetics application of human use of human beings, as Norbert Wiener put it. Those applications, Norbert Wiener, he invented like cruise control and stuff like that, cruise missiles, but now cruise control. Here, let me type in Norbert because he's easy to get a hold of here. Human Use of Human Beings is a book that Norbert Wiener wrote in 1950. And he wrote many other interesting books. If you want some good references, Cybernetics Lecture 6 by Professor Umpleby. This is fourth order cybernetics, Hans von Forster type stuff. Or The Minds of Men by Aaron and Melissa Dykes, right? Because they cover all these things in that documentary. Very good documentary on mind control. And I made a movie on mind control with several friends of mine called State of Mind, The Psychology of Control.
On
but
MK Ultra.
But yeah.
All that.
Yeah, but Minds of Men is better. Because this movie had to be 90 minutes. Theirs was allowed to be 3 hours. So they got it. They got it for the win. But the point was, the game theory guys, Nash and those guys, they didn't understand freedom. They didn't enjoy freedom. They saw freedom as a threat. They very much had a communistic view on freedom, that freedom needs to be eradicated. And game theory is, in their applications, is trying to control human will, right? Through a set of cybernetic type of program elements. But human will is not a program. It is a program with gaps in it that we have to fill in, right? And they kind of missed out. Like, I don't want to correct them because eventually they'll get it right and enslave us, but like, they're behind the curve. They don't like freedom. They can't destroy something they don't understand effectively, but they can cause us a lot of trouble as we continue to unfold freedom through actions based on a sound, objective, moral philosophy.
Guys, there's some breaking news. Ross just posted a video. I posted the link. It's like a couple minutes. Do you guys want to play that?
Yeah, let's
for
do
sure.
it. Let's close on that. Yeah, let's do that.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you guys. This has been great.
Dude, this was a blast. Richard, you want to plug away and then we'll watch this video?
Yeah.
Or
Sunday nights, grandtheftworld.com. I'm on Rumble, Odyssey, Rockfin, all the good places. It's usually banned on YouTube, but we have pirate channels on YouTube. So if you have to do the YouTube thing, Grand Theft World Podcast takes the week's news. We break it down, analyze it, give you history and evidence and artifacts to go along. So you have a non-contradictory understanding of events instead of a fragmented, I don't know what's going on, and the anxiety that comes with it, right? You want to be calm, cool, collected. You want to be able to make decisions that add up to liberty and freedom and don't take away other people's liberty and freedom. That's the idea. And so we spend 7 hours. I do it till like 4 a.m. in the morning. We start at 9:30 and we go till 4 or 5. And we analyze the week's news. And then during the week, I train adults who are freedom friendly, either for their own professional talents or for their businesses, at getautonomy.info. And we teach you what public school and university can't afford to teach you, which is how to build your talents, how to learn anything, how to make your offer to the market, and how to earn more money than what you need so that you can be attentive to life's many other perks and responsibilities. And you don't always have to worry about, like, how am I going to pay rent or put food on the table? So getting those basic skills is a preliminary part of adulting. And then I have clients that are very advanced, VIP clients who already have fast moving businesses, and they get various different levels of consultation. So that takes my 186 hours in the week, and and I'm a dad, so family time.
Awesome.
Cool.
Based. Thank you so much.
Yes.
This was
yeah,
awesome.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you guys for the
It was a lot of
invitation,
fun.
and be happy to hang out anytime. This is easy.
Yeah, let's check out this video and then maybe we can maybe comment on it. Who knows what he has to say? So I think this will be interesting.
No audio. Hold on a second. There we go. Why is there no audio?
A full pardon. I was doing life without parole, and I was locked up for more than 11 years. But he let me out. I'm a free man now. So let it be known that Donald Trump is a man of his word. Thank you so much, President Trump, for giving me this amazing blessing. I am so, so grateful to have my life back, to have my future back, to have this second chance. This is such an important moment for me and for my whole family. It's an important moment for everybody who's been working for this for years. This is a victory, and it's your victory too. And this is an important moment for everybody, everywhere, who loves freedom and who cares about second chances. So it feels amazing to be free, to say the least. It's overwhelming, and for the next however long we need, I'm going to be with my family so that we can reunite and be whole again and heal. But there's a lot to talk about, and I look forward to re-engaging with the free world. And so once I'm feeling up to it, we'll talk again.
That's awesome.
Nice.
Now, now, Bab, how many times have you had to like pack up the Free Ross posters and put them in your car and then take them to the place, then put them up so people could have awareness over the years?
I mean, scores of times. I don't know. I didn't really, that was pretty easy though, but I did notice like, wow, this has got some mileage on it. And I look back at photos of different events. I'd be like, oh, look, there it is.
Slowly
There it
getting
is.
worn, because each time it rolls up, it wears. But they're like 8 feet tall, right? I held one of them in the Pork Fest picture this year because it was all windy. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna hold these signs and make sure this is the last year we have to hold the sign up, right?
Yeah.
And I think people might look at it as like, oh, that's hard or that's work or whatever. And let me tell you, James and everyone else who helped Ross, whatever we did to help Ross was easier than seeing a political prisoner in our country, seeing someone of his caliber being caged, right? That was the hard thing, letting that go on in our lifetime and knowing that his life was being spent on. Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
because she said when your loved one's in prison, you're kind of in prison as well. So she got freed from prison just as much as Ross did. And that brought tears to everybody's eyes when that happened. And I mean,
I was thinking about that a lot when the news came out, and it was just like when we had Lynn on the podcast, and I was just thinking of my own mother, you know what I mean? Like the lengths that she went to free her son. And
She raised an army of
how many
people
brought so many people together within this liberty movement, and then to ultimately for Trump to come to LNC to come to the Libertarian Convention, like that was huge. That was
when
big.
he wasn't even the nominee. That was the magic of it. Right? Like, we're going with Chase Oliver, but will you come and say stuff and we're going to yell
nominating Chase Oliver was just like cherry on the cake for the deal to get Trump like votes.
It's like you're gonna shoe in Trump. Like
we really need to make sure that
you're gonna win this in a
Trump.
Landslide. Don't even fucking worry about it.
Very 60 chess.
Like what kind of candidates would be like the last people that libertarians work with? Like, how about a cop? And they're like, okay, do that.
Yeah, right.
And then, how about a groomer? Okay, go with that.
Groomer, a gay groomer.
And then what if the cop cuts a deal with the groomer? That'd be even better.
And then backstabs the most principled people within the party. There we go.
And they say LP candidates aren't presidential.
Well, when he reiterated it at the Tennessee crypto conference, I was like, now it's real. Because it's one thing to say something in front of a small libertarian kind of, these people are not your average people out there, right? They read books all the way to the end of a book. They have conclusions about the book they read. They're not your usual, right? But when he did it at the crypto, I was like, he's talking to a bunch of people that have a lot of crypto money, and they all know who Ross is and why he needs to be free. And the fact that their crypto is worth anything is because there was once upon a time a marketplace that gave it value in a way that had ethics and integrity built into it, right? So I knew there would be too much of a backlash for Trump monetarily from his type of supporters that he would have to carry through with that. So I'm glad on his first day of full work.
Now, how much of this can we attribute to the Hawk Tua girl?
Pretty much,
how much
none of it.
I think she was the.
Should she get some credit for Hawk Tuing on that thing?
Because it was literally when she posted that picture in front of the banner that you mentioned earlier with the QR code. It was shortly after that Trump started making these announcements.
He is a big fan of Hawk Tua.
Well, and
that goes all the way back to Marlon Maples.
I mean, he's got his own
learned how to do the rug pull. And then Melania's like, I want to do a rug pull too.
Yeah.
And then Trump's preacher, he's like, can I do a rug pull? They're like, yeah, let's all do it. So Hawk Tua girl, don't underestimate her influence. I mean, of course, Lynn gets all the
shit coins, the shit coiners.
Yeah, the shit coiners for sure. Well, I'm just glad. I mean, there were times when I didn't know if Assange was ever going to see the outside of a prison cell. And I honestly didn't know how Ross was going to see the outside of a prison cell, especially during the dark days of Biden, when he's like doing dark Brandon memes and stuff like this is like, he's the epitome of the deep state that is puppeting him, right? There was no way. But with I think that over the years, there was a lot of good attempts to bring attention, like the Free Rossathon back in 2017, right? And I think each time something was done on a more scalable level, things got bigger and there was more momentum. There was a point where who bought the ads in Times Square?
Oh, that
they
was
put the, you know,
Yeah, we're all
yeah,
over
we
this
talked
took
about
off.
that. Well, yeah.
right? Like, I commissioned the new logo, but I didn't have money to make banners, but James makes banners. And then he doesn't have money to run it in Times Square, but he'll take the banner that James is running and put it in Times Square, right? So there's so many people along the way who picked up responsibility just because they're like, I'm an American and I can do something about this. And this is the small thing I can do to contribute along the way, is like, you know, give it the things that more people can find out about it through, right? I remember doing early versions of a Free Ross t-shirt before we did the Mr. Robot version with the ones and zeros in the flag and all the symbol. I showed some copies to Lynn and she's like, well, we can't use that. Can't do it like that. Right. Cause I had, you know, some that might've had like a DPR type of character, you know. Anyway, I was just trying to figure out, how do we get to the audience that recognizes his value in the marketplace to let them know that he's, been misserved by justice? Because I think a lot of people didn't know, and if they did know, they only knew the other side of the story, that the government narrative, right? And even if you get into the government narrative, the government stole Bitcoin from Ross during the investigation and prosecuted, I think it was a DHS agent and a Secret Service agent, for stealing Bitcoin during the investigation. So they had corrupt on top of corrupt in that.
And when is Ross getting his Bitcoin back?
That's what I said.
Right.
I said,
Richard,
call
do you
Force
know
owes him
about-
some Bitcoin.
I mean, he
Richard,
probably had
do you
like
know
Allegedly.
probably had $1 billion. He's probably be a billionaire if he still had that.
Danny
Richard-
Polishchuk put on Twitter the other day, you know,
That
that
dude's hilarious. I love that guy.
so it was the first picture of Ross, you know, carrying his plant out of prison. He's super happy. And Danny said, the look of a man who's just been freed and still has a USB with 1,000 Bitcoin on it, or something to that effect.
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
somewhere.
Danny. There was proper wording in his joke, and I'm probably not paraphrasing it, but you get the gist. And
Yeah.
if only that were true.
Well,
you
Richard,
know,
remember the story from
picture
like 1
says
or
it
2
all
years
right there.
ago, where there was some Bitcoin stolen from Silk Road. It wasn't confiscated, and then they got Ross to agree that the feds could keep that.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, sure.
anything he had to do,
Probably
you know,
promised him something.
I'm going to
Didn't
guess was
deliver.
under duress, right?
That's what I'm thinking. This is
Entrapment,
completely
duress,
under
there was a whole
duress.
bunch of, yeah.
And this was not part of the sentence. This was not part of any of that stuff, but it was, I don't really know. I didn't seem to make sense at the time, but I think it was basically just so they wouldn't give him more solitary confinement. Like, he was obviously under duress, and maybe that would be if he could just challenge that. I think that's like 49,000 Bitcoin.
Well, I think I also want to put on the map, not in a specific way, but in a very general way. When somebody has a loved one in prison, that almost not only imprisons them as well, but it kind of ties their hand as far as what they can do or say during any of that time, because things might get worse for the inmate, right?
Right.
So
Well, that was Lynn when we were at the rally. She didn't want to be on video. Like, we wanted to sit her down and like talk to her, and she didn't want to do it because it was so close to,
right,
you know, Trump potentially winning.
Things
that
can
she
only
just
be
didn't wanna
screwed up
fuck
at
it
that point.
Yeah, and
right.
we were like, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's to kneel it and run the clock out at that point.
Yeah.
And you know, the point is, there's other people in this country who have relatives or loved ones as political prisoners still being held, even though there's been a lot released recently. And it's important to know, it's like, if you don't step up as the people around, like, know that they are incapacitated to some degree about what they can do or say. If you think there should be a song out there, they probably can't say, yes, let's do this thing, because, you know, there has to be a separation. So if you think these things need to be done, I'm just saying people need to take more self-responsibility and do the things they think should be done, instead of waiting for somebody else and thinking, well, I just need to tell that person and they'll do it. Right. Because sometimes you could tell them, it's like, I can't do that. It'd be nice if you did that. I could support that from afar if you did that, right? Those types of things. But I think over the past, I don't know, 50 years, Americans have become alienated and separated from each other, where it's no longer we see people in distress and we instantly step up to help them. We think, I'd love to be able to help you, but I'm in too much distress myself. And we give ourselves those excuses not to take action. And that's what allows the other side to win. Our assumptions and our inaction either win the day by losing our assumptions and getting into action, or they lose the day by doing those types of things that they, them, those would want us to do.
Taking human action is key. And that was evident at the Libertarian Convention and all the hard work that was done to get Trump to come there. And then, I'm blanking on her name, Kathy, I forget her last name, but she was out in Arizona and I think in touch with Lynn, and she was able to run it through the Secret Service to get all the free Ross or the now freed Ross signs that Babs has crafted there. But to get those in to the hall, and there was probably about 100 some, I don't know. There was probably many more, probably 100, 200. Babs was there. Jared was there. A lot of Trumpers. And when they saw all those free Ross signs, they're like, who's free Ross? Who's Ross? What's going on with Ross? What's up with that? Yeah. And the fact that just fucking skyrocketed on Twitter searches. And when he came out of the gate and said, I guarantee day one, like, I will pardon, like, that says a lot. And seeing all the optics of the free Ross signs and all of that, like, that was huge. And, but
well, don't forget the night before had been the Enemies of the State ball.
That too, which
right?
Babs was the MC, and just getting so much awareness. And there were so many people came up to us and were like, who's Ross? Who's like Trumpers? And we're like, I don't know about this. But, seeing their guy being persecuted by the deep state and then realizing, wait, crypto, he set up a website. Like, what the fuck? This is ridiculous. And it's like, yeah. Hello?
Well, you kind of have to tell people what's up. Like, he created a website, victimless crime, not a violent offender, persecuted for what actions other people took, persecuted for his political philosophy. Because if you let them go out and see, oh, he did murder for hire, right? All these things that they'll get infected by inaccuracies from the mainstream media, the deep state has made sure that narrative is everywhere.
That piece of shit, that Mossad fucking asshole, probably from the Mossad organization that is, what is it? Not Daily Caller. Is it Daily Caller? No, Daily Wire. Daily Wire. Michael Knowles, the day after, like probably a couple hours after Ross was pardoned, he said like, oh, well, a drug dealer dealing in like selling hardcore drugs. Like, dude,
I responded. I quote tweeted him because just show me how ignorant you are real quick, Michael. Oh,
exactly.
Yeah. I mean, if you read things on face value and believe the government without question, that's a Michael Knowles position. And if you want that, go watch Daily Wire. And if you want the opposite, people watch Grand Theft World.
See, that's the thing. And I think ultimately that was, so many of these libertarian purists that I've dealt with in the party are just like, oh my God, you're dealing with MAGA people. But here's the difference. Like, people in MAGA are like in just living their lives, living in a real world. And then once you like, all of a sudden there's been like this kind of great awakening, like conscious, like you said, and they're just kind of like, wait, what the fuck? That's fucked up. Like, what is going on?
Just in the libertarian waiting room. That's all MAGA is.
Exactly. They're in the libertarian waiting room. And if you just like nudge them a little bit,
libertarian purgatory.
You're gonna have to help them in some key areas.
You get out of purgatory.
Yeah, they could go back down to hell, or you could let them up into.
This is past Virgil's 10th ring, or Dante's 10th ring. We get to see Virgil again. Beatrice.
Domestic military deployment bad.
But I mean, like you said, Richard, just give them a little nudge, and they're basically going in our direction. They're going towards freedom. So,
freedom's a low pressure area. Tyranny's a high pressure area. Badnarik didn't have to sell me on libertarianism. He just expressed a low pressure idea that was more accurate than what I had, and it was easy to move over to that. I think that's all we have to do. For those people who believe that, if you think it's the schoolhouse rock, 3 branches of government, checks and balances, I would love for that to be real. I would love for that to be real, but it's not. We still have these, I could show you a 1911 book from Woodrow Wilson and his campaign speeches. It goes on for 8 pages. So everyone claims this is not a real quote, but no one gives you an 8-page quote. They paraphrase it, right? The gist of it is there exists, this time in 1911, there exists in this country a group of people that if you come out and try to innovate or rise up in business, that they will bring their monopoly to crush you, and that when you speak up in condemnation of them, that you best not speak above your breath when you speak in condemnation. They are everywhere. It's a prolific statement. And they made him president after he said that, because they're like, we can't have this guy running around talking about us. We better bring him into the fold, right? Bring him in. Let's give him a presidency. Let him bring in the Federal Reserve. Everything will be fine. But it was prolific. If you're an individual, entrepreneur, a business owner, someone who believes in the fabric of freedom, because those things all go together. You can't have mom and pop owning a shop if you don't have freedom in this country. Communism doesn't allow such proclivities to exist. So we need freedom and free market entrepreneurism, voluntary capitalism, if you will. Right? Agorism, any of these types of things, SEK 3 type of ideas are great. But that doesn't exist without the monopoly of violence and force over here that is always having to be kept at bay. Right? So until we get our education on, we're not going to get our freedom back. Schooling was taking the free will out of your education and having the state dictate what you're taught. Well, I don't think your captor is going to teach you how to make yourself free of your captor. Right? They want you to have Stockholm syndrome and some Munchausen by proxy type of thing going on, and keep yourself away from freedom. And they're all good. And as you see, like, they're expanding toward their goals pretty fast until recently. And now we start to see some inefficiencies in their infrastructure and some infighting amongst their own people. Right? I never thought I'd see Justin Trudeau step down or Gavin Newsom taking flack from people in California, but those things are going on. Not so many people.
Klaus Schwab have to resign?
Well, I was just going to say, well, he has a next generation, just like Alexander Soros for George. They're handing the torches off. They're in a big, as team sports would go, rebuilding year. Right? Gates is beating off the field.
They got a couple first round draft picks. They got some
talent.
They're trying to build
team.
up their cap. They got some cap space.
Yeah, but
they're gonna have to sign some big free agents in the offseason, but they're gonna have a down year or two.
Yes, and there is a change in the tide or a swing of the pendulum toward liberty and freedom and individual, not slaveness. Right? I'm a 21st century abolitionist, and there's more slavery in the world right now than ever in human history. So I don't feel like I'm doing the best job, but I'm going to go out and keep doing it every day because it needs to be done, man. It needs to be done, just like it needs to be done, which is
absolutely. And on that note, let's wrap it up here. But yeah, thanks for coming on again, Richard. That was a lot of fun, very enlightening.
It was a good workout. I appreciate it, and I look forward to sharing.
We'll save some rabbit holes for next time too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Plenty more where that came from. But these rabbit holes, see, I help people exit the rabbit hole, right? What is the reality of this thing that you've heard about? Is there evidence? Is there not evidence? So it'll be a lot of fun. And I'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Let's do it.
Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Richard. Cool. That was awesome.
Yeah, and thanks for everybody for tuning in. If Richard brought you over here, thanks for checking us out. We're the Punk Rock Libertarians podcast.